What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Game Dev Unchained. I am your host, Brandon Pham. This is the #1 game development podcast about game development and the lifestyle thereof. And today, it's just going to be me, right? This is an episode dedicated to the fans, about me. It is a new segment of the show that I want to introduce. Every couple months, I think it's be the appropriate time, and it is called the SoapBox. All right. So what is the SoapBox? It's dedicated to my Unchained development status. Right. So when I started this podcast about five years ago, man, it's almost that. It was the beginning of a theory of let's do something about the industry. It's on this trajectory, and it doesn't seem to be stopping. Whereas the workers of the industry, anywhere, even including leads and under, are in this perpetual cycle of crunching and endless chase of the next job, right? And didn't seem like it was improving, and the industry jobs felt like it was getting smaller and smaller. So the choices got more and more limited. This is, again, just thinking back what the beginning of the podcast and what the climate was with the game industry. And there were only a few selected mecca cities like Los Angeles, San Francisco, Austin, Texas, Seattle, that were concentrated game development areas for people kind of settle in, and that came with the problems of commuting, right? But these are mega cities basically, so these areas that are concentrated are pretty expensive. Therefore, you would have to commute to work on average a dedicated 2-3 hours every day. So that this was the norm. And you flash forward 5 years after to today, we have a pandemic. The game industry is on its next gen cycle with the PS5 and Xbox Series X. There are a lot of things to be thankful for, a lot of things to be excited about. VR gaming I think it's on its either second or third uphill battle of getting the masses kind of to buy in. I think the Quest 2 is clearly the leader in this. It looks exciting. It's removing all the wires. Streaming games is becoming more the norm, with pretty much every tech company, major game publisher having their own type of services, like Sony with their PlayStation Now, Xbox with its Game Pass, Google Stadia entering into the field, and most recently Amazon Luna, and then Nvidia even has its own kind of streaming service. So there's a lot of things to be excited about, a lot of things to be scared about. So what the SoapBox and the intent of the show is to kind of make it less generalized, right? I wanted to kind of talk about my experience because that's all I know, for sure. And so when Larry and I started this podcast, it was at that time trying to navigate through this industry and ask professionals who've found these outlets within this machine, a place where they could thrive, right? And I've always felt like there were 3 ways of finding independence and happiness within the game industry. You don't have to hit all 3, but 2 out of 3 is always seems to be the magic number here, which is choosing where you live, choosing what you work on, and then well, I mean, I think money plays a factor, right? So money in financial freedom, right? And so if you get 2 of those 3, if you're super awesome, you get 3 out of 3, you generally have like a pretty good grip on your career path and who you are in the industry. So for me, starting the podcast and bringing on these awesome people on, experts in the fields, was to kind of navigate my own and chart my own path, trying to hit those all 3. I have to say that flash forward to today, I luckily and methodically am able to hit all 3, and I am infinitely a lot happier. So even with the pandemic, I think people are getting a taste of that lifestyle more. Everybody's working from home. I did not see that coming. I always felt and always said repeatedly that office politics have to do with the office, usually being in the office. And I felt like a good portion of those problems will go away as soon as you find that ability to work from home and to not worry about moving to a city you don't really like, to stay within your hometown, right? So that's the part of where you live, and having that creative freedom to work on what you want, and having that financial stability, the third arm of my theory there, to completely be free of worry, right? And I kind of mentioned this many times, where there is a portion that, although we're kind of luckily falling into that by default because of the pandemic, everyone's working from home. These major companies that were resistant to that are forced into that type of thinking now, and have, by this point, created an infrastructure to support hundreds of people working from home, right? That barrier is completely removed. All the resources, all the money already has been spent to invest in this future, because the pandemic is far from over, maybe in 2021, in the foreseeable future. And a return from that will be either a hybrid, but I don't think a complete reversal. With that being said, what's going on? Well, I mean, we're connected. I'm connected. You're connected. You are probably working at these studios, and you're probably seeing the aftermath of this very hippie thought of everybody work from home, which means everyone's happy and projects get done. It's quite the opposite. I think it's actually we're in a place where it's I think we're in the precipice of a major layoff disaster. From the stories that I'm gathering from people I'm hearing from major studios that are delaying deadlines and milestones. And a recent story that you guys should check out is Gabe Newell, right? Gabe Newell just recently are thinking of just relocating temporarily all their Steam workers as kind of like a paid for vacation in Hobbiton in New Zealand. Not exactly where the hobbits are, but New Zealand's kind of known as the leader of a major country right now that's handling their shit with the pandemic, and have this virus completely on lockdown when anything seeps through, and everybody's relatively living normal lives over there, just being out and about. And it's a beautiful country, right? So a recent proposal on and he's going straight to the prime minister or the president, I forget what they refer their leader over there, on making the logistics work. And I think there was a whole press day about this conversation, and only press was able to paraphrase, but weren't able to kind of reveal the exact details of what was said, only just certain quotes that were prepared for press release. But the idea of the conversation was, what would that scenario look like? And a lot of data was shared. And, given that Valve doesn't really have like a great record of productivity, right? I mean, they take forever to ship a game. That's not to say they don't work, but I would just have to somehow parallel that to, if there's nothing publicly shown and you're a private company, right? And you're a place that's supposed to be shipping out games and you're not shipping out games, the end result is the only thing that matters, then you're not doing anything, right? But so put that aside, Valve is finding that 70% or above of inefficiency with this pandemic, right? And that kind of falls in line with my suspicion to also what I'm hearing about the industry at large, where deadlines are just not being met. And there is as a whole in to the game developer in general, the population, we do need that in-office interaction to make things work. The brainstorming session was referenced a lot, in where Valve was just having complete difficulty. It wasn't about motivation, but in terms of productivity, it was just difficult to get things going. Multiple Zoom meetings just doesn't get the job done. As if you're at the creative front of a project and you need that interaction with everybody to participate. Currently, the pandemic and these virtual solutions are not good enough. And the human factor, I think, plays a major role in why things are just being pushed back. People are just not good at self-discipline and productivity. And a lot of it is not just that they don't want to get work done. Of course they do. Their livelihood and their job requires them to. I think the balance is what throws people off, with especially senior developers that are not single, have wives and kids or husbands to balance, and it's hard to carve out a comfortable space as well within their home to dedicate to just work, right? And that's the advantage of being in office. It's like fully concentrated for and designed for work. Though I had my suspicion, I didn't think it would be that big of a problem. I think with many, we were just hearing a overbearing amount of people celebrating that, yeah, I get more work done. And I think that those voices are a small percentage of the whole, because who actually announces that, hey man, I'm actually not getting a lot of work done and this sucks and I'm fearful for my job performance currently. And I don't know what to do, right? No one's going to say that publicly, right? But that's the majority of people right now in the industry. And so I guess what I can do to relate to that is like, well, the SoapBox isn't just a survey of what's going on, but my opinion on at least what I'm going through too. So what's funny is like I'm hearing every I thank you for a lot of fans reaching out through emails and stuff. I love having conversations outside of the podcast on our Discord to kind of catch up with all you guys and everything like that. And every few often I would get an awesome email of someone finding the podcast and thrilled that there are hundreds of episodes they have to go through, and they're starting for episode 1, right? So I gotta start coming up with the nomenclature for these people who are like warrioring through from episode 1, which was, even for me, it's hard to listen to because of the low tech that's involved creating the first episode. They are in for a rude awakening by episode 200 when the breakup happened, right? So that last year was the greatest challenge, going from a partnership podcast to a solo. And I had to get very comfortable talking to the camera, to you guys, for long periods of time, just to externalize my thoughts. And I personally still feel that I work better bouncing off from someone else. And I just like the natural evolution of a conversation, and less about talking to myself to a camera, right? But that's just the way it is. And I've learned through the hard way, man. Like these lessons, even when before I went Unchained, where I guess a little status update. Last time I talked to you guys, I run 3 companies right now. The Game Dev Unchained, as well as the other shows, are under the Blue Champs brand name, right? That encompasses everything, entertainment and media. And then I run an online school, as you guys may know, to teach, students, anybody who wants to learn game design or game development at an affordable price, and in most cases even free. Which reminds me, this week we're opening up free enrollment for those who are interested. And then the main money maker, the one that's floating my boat and my family's boat, is Godemics, and it's like a co-development studio. So we work with a lot of AAA indie. So I'm still working with these awesome IPs and projects that I would have continued if I were working for these studios independently. But as a company now, we've grown to 20 plus people, full-time and contractors. I've been running it for 3 years with my partner, Leo Gonzalez. I've had him on this podcast a couple of times. Great partner, awesome guy, learning a lot from him. And it's been fun just navigating this thing with him. I've never intended, even at the start of the podcast, to see myself as a businessman where most of my day is business development and less about art production. Didn't see that shift going. I always thought I would always be producing art, and in a weird way, naturally, right? I would love to kind of take care of both of my day just making art, but that's not the case. I'm just in another stage of my career in life now where I got to worry about all the structure of a business, right? And never went to business school. You guys, longtime listeners, know I went to a overpriced art school. Didn't even have a business elective, right? So a lot of this is through self-learning and experience and failing fast, which happens to be my forte of how I usually learn things. I kind of just do things terribly at first. So even with the podcast, kind of theoretically was meant for me to prepare for this lifestyle that I'm going through right now. When I took the leap of faith, it was still a leap of faith. There was my idea of safety was completely destroyed, I think, within the first month or two, because the reason why the podcast is called Game Dev Unchained, it really felt like that. I felt like I stepped out of the matrix a bit because I was used to a salary job. I was used to earning a paycheck every 2 weeks for 40-hour weeks. I thought that was how things get done. And then as soon as I stepped out of that bubble and realized, you can make these business deals, you can make these transactions that set you up for the next couple months where you technically have to be behind the desk working as much and still relatively earn a competitive earning, or even more in a lot of cases, a lot more, by doing less. And that completely flipped the script for me, right? Did not, even with all the guests that I've had on in this podcast who've kind of gone through that, hearing that, somewhat studying it, but going through it was very scary. And so it was at a point where I'm 1.5 years through that I'm truly unchained. I'm not answering to anybody, but maybe to my partner. I still got to let him know. Got to let him know when I'm taking a day off or something, right? But mostly my day is made up of what do I want to do? And there are some weirdness to that, because I thought, I've been side hustling ever since the podcast. I've been always doing things on the side. I was teaching at a physical school outside of my full-time job. I was trying things, Games Go Online was born. A couple years after the podcast, or a year after the podcast, it happened around the same time. Preparing that, and then Godemics. There was a lot of things always in motion, but it wasn't until I actually stopped the security of a full-time job where it felt real, where it felt my mindset completely shifted. And I always thought that once I dedicate my time to completely dedicate to the full-time hustle, right? Just actually all this, the online school, Games Go Online, the podcast, Godemics, I always felt like, oh, I get to do pretty much everything I want to do, which is still true. But now I'm finding the day going by so quickly. And my struggle now is more like, how do I get to do everything that I want to do in the traditional 8-hour, right? I still keep it within 8 hours because it's just like kind of force in me, right? That's just how I operate now. I usually wake up at around 7. I start work at 7. I wake up like way early that for working out. Hence the gi, right? And then usually my day ends around 5. I try to end it around 5. And of course there's breaks in between with lunch break and all that stuff. But that's generally my day. And I was very surprised where I'm like, I thought I can get everything done, but I'm just finding like things just fall by the side. And, Godemics definitely have like a team to kind of support all the services that we provide. But like, largely Blue Champs GSO is just me and, scholars and contractors and all stuff like that. But like largely me just figuring out the business development and growing the school and all the podcasts, all this stuff. This past year, I finally opened up the gates, and I want to shout out to Joseph, who's helping big time, especially on the Blue Champ side, to kind of edit these videos into clips, preparing the blogs. That has been completely awesome. And I've always been kind of like a control freak where relinquishing control on a product kind of scary, right? Because I always felt like, hey, man, it takes me longer to explain things than to just do it myself. But I'm at a breaking point where I can't do that anymore. And it's been incredibly helpful to kind of just give creative freedom to others and help out with that. And same thing on the GSO side. These are things that, man, I wished that were more well documented and was better just information out there for people who are trying to get this. I guess in a way the podcast, if anything, is giving you guys insight, and that's why I want to share this in this soapbox right here, to share you my story, because it is very tough, specifically for our industry. There's a ton of books out there, right, for starting business, and a lot of those general information did help me kind of through this phase. But for something so unique as our industry, like games, and I think there's a lot of indie studios, of course, but I think still a majority of game developers are working for the man, right? I think a majority, if you take everyone in a room, most people who raise their hands are people that work for a publisher, for a game company, and less are about indie developers who are figuring out on their own. I mean, there's a good percentage, don't get me wrong, but I think a majority of senior, well-established veterans are in the I'm working for a company camp, right? And so while they're busy with that, there are, I think with indie developers, there is a good mark of knowledge to, of course, I mean, we have a huge amount of indie developers on the podcast, kind of helping us guide through this, it was still very difficult for me to kind of figure this out, and in a lot of cases figure this out on my own. And the only way I kind of learned this was through experiencing it. So for those who are doing things on the side, I think last week's episode with Ray kind of reminded me a bit of the importance of what the side hustle, right? I never forgot. I mean, my side hustle is my full-time job now, but because I was kind of knee deep in that in the last year and a half, I kind of forgot that in a weird way, a lot of listeners out there are still at these jobs, right? So I kind of want to rewind back that step that I took 5 years ago. And the funny thing is, I keep referencing 5 years. It's probably a little more than that. But ever since the beginning of the podcast, the thing that is so scary about all this, that's ringing true and rang true for me, right? I don't know if that's grammatically correct. I'm always bad with grammar. Was that whatever side thing that you do outside your full-time gig, if there's consistency and constant analysis and upgrading what that is, making it a better product, to sculpt that into a better project, takes about 5 years for some self-sustainability or some type of stability to move on to the next level, right? That's about 5 years for the podcast, where I took that leap of faith, and I am so happy with that. And in a weird way, I'm not like at the beginning, I don't feel it anymore, but at the beginning I was kind of like sour, a little sour, but happy, right? Sour, but happy. But this is the human nature of jealousy right here, where, I was doing my thing for a good, 9 months before like February, March of this year, where the pandemic hit, where I was already working from home. I figured this stuff out, the challenges with that, which I'll go back in a bit. And then everybody suddenly is working from home. I was like, these guys, you guys took all these, I worked so hard to get to this place. Everyone just took a shortcut and had like a virus kind of go through the world, and now everyone's working from home. And there was a good part of that where people kept their salary job, super comfortable, super stable, at least for now. Just a little glimpse at the beginning there where honestly I felt like I should have just stuck it through and enjoy this free money, right? But obviously, I'm happy that people are getting a taste, because I think that's what woke me into creating Game Dev Unchained, is because I've had a taste of what my ideal day looks like, and a lot of it didn't have anything to do with going to work. So that was a problem. The moment I realized that, I sat down and started making a game plan of how do I unchain myself from work, right? And that's why the teaching thing is a very natural step for developers in the industry to be outside of the cubicle and in a way kind of give back to our industry, right? There's constantly a lot of students who want to get in, so it's very viable. It's a very viable option. Obviously, I create a whole school for it. So that was the journey I took to kind of learn about side hustling. And what Ray said last week was it was a great advice, right? Which is, if you're going to crunch, right? The last week's episode was all about, CD Red Project crunching, and when they promised they wouldn't. And it's the same story every few months. If you're a game developer, you're going to have to crunch. There's no way around it. But that investment in yourself, that decision to invest in yourself, if you're going to crunch, don't crunch for that empty promise of a bonus, right? It's rarely worth it. Like he said, there's 5 to 6 games. I completely agree. A year that makes that amount of money that actually gets to be forwarded to developers of that game, right? Very few. And even then, it's not that crazy. It's nice, but it's not that crazy. Knowing what I know now, it's nothing compared to what you can do on your own, right? And that brings me to the final point of this. Is like, whatever you do, man, spend that extra hour at home working on your portfolio, building a brand, building an audience, building a product that's going to propel you and create this nest egg that you can fall back on when something doesn't work out at work. At work, you'll always be having no control, right? You're working for someone. They make all the decisions behind closed doors. And if they're nice, you might get some breadcrumbs of that success. But the idea of no control is what always bothered me. Because no matter what, you can imagine me at a workplace when things, my last few jobs were kind of like that, where things didn't go the way I felt that could have gone better, right? Office politics involves, office complaining. And I was in that state where, oh, wow, man, I am back at it again. And it's the reason why I avoided AAA studios right after, shipping Call of Duty. It's just like, I know how that system works. And I just needed to take a break from that and figure out what other corners of the industry, like indie development, like mobile development, AA development, have these companies figured out something that these AAA companies are repeatedly making mistakes about, right? So, and in all honesty, these companies did have gave me glimpses of what could be done better, right? Mobile industry was surprisingly very fun. It was I was in San Francisco. It was my last job that I worked for somebody, right? About a year and a half ago. And even going up there, I had a game plan to exit to do what I'm doing now, which took 6 months longer because I gave myself a year. It actually took a year and 6 to 7 months for me to grab my courage to quit, right? But what I saw with the mobile strand, and I'm glad I kind of ended it with that, was like the efficiency of think of it as a business. And I think a lot of these game companies don't think of it as a business. They think of it as a creative endeavor first, and they do the best to kind of like survey the audience of what they're getting into, but in large part, they're not thinking as business people with daily revenue streams and the ability to sustain themselves when things don't go exactly how they intended to. It's still like gambling. And so this mobile industry, this company I worked for, I was able to kind of see how they operate. And every day was about numbers, about, customer behavior, about pivoting, about evolving, about sustainability and marketability and projections, and missing those projections, what options they have in place already to pivot, to constantly evolve the formula, right? That was a mind-blowing way of looking at games. I was so used to companies by that point of spraying and praying, like just we have a game idea, we think it's going to be a hit, only have like a slight half-ass data plan of why we think it would be a hit. Give us some money and we'll prove it out, right? In green light meetings. And every green light meeting, every 3-4 months milestone, is constantly trying to prove not just to ourselves, but to the publishers, that is providing us incremental payment of why this game should keep being financed, and are we on time, right? That is a bizarre way, and the more money that you're dealing with, the more risk that these milestones aren't going to work out, right? So it's scary, man. It's a bizarre way of doing things. It doesn't work. In most cases, it doesn't work. And that's what I was used to. So to kind of see that switch up of a mobile industry that I've been hearing so much about works crazy. And all that little knowledge wasn't for me to carry forward to the next company. It was more to like, all right, how do I bring this back to what I'm doing now? And so what people are experiencing now because of the pandemic and having just missing deadlines and milestones, all these companies that are delaying the inevitable, which is massive layoffs. I think it's going to be a cascading effect. It might happen in November, where basically they can only stretch out so far. Everyone's just holding on as long as they can until a company breaks, where they're going to be the first one to announce there's going to be a mass layoff. Because you got to think about it, man. These companies are being financed on these incremental milestones, and these milestones are constantly being pushed back, which also means the budget for the game originally is being ballooned up every month or even every day. Hundreds of developers, right? That is becoming a huge issue, if not already. And at some point, they're going to have to cut their losses, and games are going to have to be canceled, postponed, where they can't keep paying developers to sit around and miss deadlines. So I am suspecting November, maybe even the first quarter of 2021, we're going to hear some crazy unemployment happening. And the way that these companies are kind of stretching out as far as they can is they're hiring more people to kind of offload the missed deadlines, to the extra things that they have to do because of missing deadlines. And well, again, that's another way of ballooning the project. So I am very scared for my colleagues, my brothers and sisters out there, for you guys that are in this. I hope I'm wrong, but I really do feel like every day that passes is a disaster for the game industry. Even Valve, who has infinite money, they're not complaining about money, but they can see that productivity has gone down so much that they're willing to consider basically relocating their team, hundreds of people, to live in New Zealand for 6 months to kind of sit the pandemic out and get things done, right? That is a crazy proposition, but that's the measures that are being taken right around this time frame, right? That's Valve thinking 2-3 months ahead and having to act fast. Otherwise, it's just going to be a dead year, another dead year for 2021, right? So companies like Valve are making plans of how to combat this. Other people who don't have the ability to kind of relocate everybody are faced with the more realistic proposition of just laying people off, right? So why am I telling you all this? Why is all this? Why am I making this, the part of the conversation of the soapbox, right? I just want to remind people, man, this is, if you're listening, if you're watching this, Game Dev Unchained, it's not just a catchy name, right? It's not just a cool way to hang out and kind of learn about the industry. It's constantly trying to remind you guys, it's like, unless you work for yourself in this industry, you're really never going to be free to make decisions. Even with now, people are grateful enough to hit one of those three marks that I kind of mentioned at the beginning, where you can work on creative freedom, right? Whatever project you want to work on, where you want to live wherever you want. And the third one, financial stability. Even though right now the pandemic is forcing everybody to kind of work from where they want to work from where they want, which is at your home. It is only short term, right? So executives at these companies who are not seeing productivity, seeing missed deadlines, and just generally, miss everybody in the office. As soon as it's over, I don't think they're going to be full throttle everybody back in the office. I think it'd be a hybrid approach. It's going to be a slow roll into the office. It's not like day one, everyone's going to be back in. You got to think about it. This is the misconception with the vaccine that people don't really think through, is that for some reason they think day one's vaccine, everyone can go back to work, right? It's a long journey right after that. So we're not even at that step yet, but it's a good 6 months after that step where maybe half the office can be back. We have vaccinations now for the flu, and not everybody's obligated to take that. So, and not only that, the supply of these things are not going to be openly available to everybody. It's going to be for first responders, for people on the front lines. And then, a slow roll to the public. And even with that, the vaccine is not going to be 100% proof of making this work, right? So, dude, we're in this for another 2 years. So what I'm saying is that this is a perfect time to not have a manager over your shoulder checking your everyday progress. You're not going to be judged by your colleague if you finish your work early and work on something else. This is the perfect time to initiate that self-help plan right here, to whatever that is, the endeavor with teaching, with your own business, with your game. I highly encourage everybody, like I did, to start doing that. I wish I had the pandemic when I started doing side hustle. Imagine how much stuff I would have gotten done. But you guys have the opportunity. It's never too late to start doing that, and you just gotta map it out. If we're gonna be in this pandemic for another year and a half, 2 years max, maybe, you're 2 out of 5 years to finding success. It takes about 5 years. What a weird mathematical truth, but I've heard many guests on the show saying the same thing, and I've experienced, for some reason, 5 years seems to be the time when you figure shit out for self-sustainability, and just having that comfort of risk factor to actually go out and do something about it. So, the initial issues that people are going through, I went through that phase where working from home was completely difficult. Carving out a space to dedicate to work, making sure your home workstation is legit. So you're comfortable to doing and accomplishing things. But aside from that, setting up some ground rules between your spouse and your children of when you need to work and why you need to focus. That, honestly, even to this day, there is still some semblance where I'm not completely 100% on top of it. Much better than before, where, clear guidelines are set, but, that guideline, that line of work and being a father and husband gets blurred because you're at home and you're available, and the kids are constantly wanting to play with you, which is always a good thing, right? Even though it's annoying, but that's what life is about, right? That took a good solid 6 months of fighting, arguing, and finding some compromise, some rhythm with the spouse, with my wife in particular, in setting those rules up with the kids and children of when playtime is happening, right? Good 6 months after doing this full time. And when I say semblance, it still happens to this day where I'm still going to have to remind my family where the line is. And, I need time to work because we're in the pandemic. I need to feed you guys, right? So let me work. That is happening right now for everybody. And it's even harder with kids doing homeschooling, right? You can't even drop them. See, at least I had the luxury that I could have I was able to drop one of my kids at least at school for hours on end, and we were we were close to putting our young one, I have a 3-year-old, into daycare right before the pandemic. Like the March of this year, we were looking at a school, and we were finally deciding on one and about to pay the monthly fee. That's how close we were as soon as the pandemic hit. And so that got pushed back. So my 3-year-old is going to be intellectually behind, even with all the homeschooling. He's just, he's missing out preschool. Yeah. So the no school thing is tough, and I understand. And like within my neighborhood right now, I get it. Right? You're for the ones that can't do 100%, at least in my area, there's a hybrid approach where half the time they can be at a physical school with safety measures, and then the other half online schooling, or they can do full online schooling, right? So my kid is doing full online schooling. And even with that hybrid approach, it's like, I still feel like you're throwing your kid into the fire and hoping he doesn't get burnt, right? There's a pandemic going on, and kids are the dirtiest groups ever to spread diseases. So, but a lot of parents are left with no choice. I mean, it's either that or daycare. They have to work. And thankfully, we're living in an industry so far that it's not forcing us to go back to work, but a lot of people have to go back to a physical space to work. They're not a digital company. Can't get that shit done, right? So a large percentage of our problem, game developers, is the full homeschooling stuff. And I get that. That was a hiccup, right? By the time the pandemic hit, I was 8 months in of figuring the shit out and had a rhythm going. I was good, right? But then that happened where it kind of put a halt into everything, into the fam operation here at the Blue Champs camp, where we had to adjust and make things work. And that's looking like the case for the next year and a half. That's a crazy thing to think about, right? At least when I was growing up, I didn't have that weird 2-3 year gap where everything was not normal. Wow. I mean, I'm looking forward to kind of seeing this generation grow up with this experience of how it affected them. The overexposure of screen time, the over-reliance on technology, the social aspect, the social absence of friends, or their 2-year gap there. Wow, man, that's a lot for kids and parents. Each separate problems that we're going to have to somehow get together and figure out. But yeah, man, developers overall, the people that I'm seeing succeeding through this is that they are having something else on the side and taking advantage of this time. The people who are fully all in to their game job, I am very fearful for. And in a lot of cases, you have no control over that because you're behind at work. And if you're behind on these milestones, you don't really have that much time to work on side stuff. You're just trying to catch up. It's a tricky problem, man. But I would say that like betting on someone else's project is always the wrong route, I feel, because you have no control over that. Even if you hit your milestones and catch up, right? You're always going to be left out of that decision room where leads or management or the man with the money is saying like, hey, the team as a whole is still behind. We can't keep going on like this. The project has to be postponed or canceled. And people have to be on leave temporarily, right? With no paycheck. Like, I think the person who is able to stay on top of things admirably, like close enough where they're not in trouble, but still use that extra time to work on their project or figure out their secondary income, is going to be always, I feel, a leg up on their colleagues. Right? I feel no matter what worst case scenario, that person who is unchaining themselves will always be put in a position where they have more options. And I think overall, in my personal experience, that have worked well. I mean, I worked on big companies, right? And last week I kind of hinted at, there was these life-changing bonuses, and of course I know for a fact my colleagues, because I would not crunch, because I just get my shit done on time and leave early, right? I was cheated out of a bigger bonus, but in the end, because I spent all that extra time at home doing all the side stuff, I feel, compared to colleagues that are still working in those places, and no hate on that, because some people just enjoy work and like doing things outside of work, and that's their life, and that's fine. But I still feel personally, if I were to compare myself, dedicating all that time on my full-time job instead of myself, I feel comparing to myself that I'm in a much better place. I'm at home, man. I'm at home. I make my own decision. I learned a shitload of business stuff this past 2 years that I had no idea, had never had any interest, had never even popped a book open about it, and just kind of learn it through experimenting and failing. If there ever is a day that I have to crawl back into the workplace and work for someone else, which I highly doubt for two reasons. My ego won't allow me to. And practically, I have so many survival skills that I've learned, especially through the pandemic. I've always said this at the beginning of this. It's like, man, if I can manage myself and my family and my companies through this pandemic, I am never going back to work, because I figured out something that is a lifelong skill that I would always be savvy, because of the skills that I've attained, to figure it out without having to go back and work behind a desk anymore. And I'm glad to say I'm on the other side of that. I mean, like, the pandemic's still going on, but in terms of months ahead, I am good to go. Yeah. So, David, you're mentioning the adage, you have never put all your eggs in one basket. Yeah, completely correct. And this is actually very pertaining to game development, right? What we're finding here, and my business, is that the generalist specialist is a lot more valuable. The times of working in an office at a AAA company have changed, where it used to be cool, where you're really good at texturing and that's all you know, that's all you do all day, every day. You're the texture guy. It used to be like that. But now, to be even more competitive, and to kind of justify the salary that they're paying for, and to future-proof yourself from layoffs, you're going to have to pick up some side skill within the company to be more resourceful. So, multiple eggs in many basket. So a generalist specialist is pretty much, if that texture guy was really good at texturing, but understand environment and world building and all the other stuff that pertains to texturing, that person is a leg taller than any colleagues that he's sitting next to, right? And that is the essential now for being a game developer, and essential for being a business person, right? When I say business person, it's not just, what I'm doing, but also for indie developers, right? So, I still have that itching, and I'm working on something, right? I'm telling you guys, like, hey, take advantage of this time. Even though I've always been working from home for the last year and a half, with the pandemic, and even me, like kind of my bucket is full of tasks that I want to get to. I'm a game developer at heart, and I want to make a game to call my own. And I have plans. I know what I want to make. I know what's going to be cool. Haven't had the time, but I'm using this opportunity, this pandemic opportunity. It's weird to call it the pandemic an opportunity, but that's what it is. This extra time to make something by the end of the year, right? To release a prototype by myself, to kind of scratch that itch. Right? There's so many things you can do during this time. Sorry about that. And you're going to have to take advantage of that. So David's asking, did I have formal schooling for game dev? Yeah, man. I went to the Art Institute of California in Orange County. That doesn't exist more. Art Institute used to have like 50 campuses in its heyday. I call it the game development gold rush, where there suddenly was all these schools having offering degrees for game development. So I got suckered into that. Typical school, it was privatized, for profit. So it was, thankfully I had scholarship and stuff to kind of help me with the payment and everything. But it still ended up being like $60K for 3 years. I think a lot of my colleagues and students nowadays are $100K plus just to get a degree, and was not worth it. Overall, although my experience for meeting lifelong friends and learning things with a guide and forming relationships and friendships, could have done that on my own. That's why it's one of the biggest reasons why I created Game School Online, to kind of help students avoid all that. And successfully, we're in the 4 or 5 year mark where students are finding jobs without having to pay or do any of that. So I'm very proud of that as a side passion for everything I'm doing besides the podcast. But I'm also kind of helping them, and very much so. The Game Dev Unchained podcast is a mixture of students and professionals. I would say a larger proportion are professionals who are listening to this. And that's why a lot of my conversation is tailored towards, if I were to talk to myself, at a job, at a desk. So even though you guys are technically unchained right now because of the pandemic, I want to remind you guys, and I guess share my personal stories. Man, it was so worth it to have started 5 years ago on a little pet project and see it grow. And it wasn't about, getting all the numbers. It wasn't about downloads. It wasn't about viewership. It was about, how can I keep something going, improve on it from feedback, and constantly work on making the product better. That loop helped prepare me for all these other business adventures, and showed me the importance of how time can slip past you, right? It's like a snap, man. It's near the end of the year, right? It's the end of the year 2020. And because of the pandemic, it just completely ate up a whole year. And when I think about when I quit my full-time job to go fully in my business ventures, that was over 2 years ago. Or almost a year and a half. Was it a year and a half? Jesus, yeah. It's like almost 2 years now. That's crazy, man. And we're not getting any younger. The industry is getting tougher. You guys and gals owe it to yourself to unchain yourself. And my journey is, in my opinion, still starting. There's so many things that I want to do to give back to this industry, to make my own game, to do all these things within the industry that is worth my time. And the ability, hopefully this pandemic has taught you the taste of freedom, where you can make your own hours, basically, outside of those scheduled Zoom meetings. your time is your own, and it's all about the work just getting done. And there's no producer breathing down your neck every second. If they are doing that through production boards or Jira tasks or whatever, I apologize. But in most cases, it sounds like you're getting a taste of what it's like working for yourself and kind of charting your own destiny. I want you guys to, I just highly advise you guys to really hold on to that, take advantage of it, and build off of it, because that taste is what got me started with the podcast and everything that I'm doing to get me to this place, right? Don't swat that away. Don't just dedicate your whole day to work and then just play games at night. You got to take advantage of this. This is the perfect time to kind of figure shit out, because I really do feel the game industry this year in particular has been weird. That when in the midst of all these layoffs from all these other jobs in the industry, unemployment rate is super high. The game industry as a whole, who is known for laying off, hasn't laid off anybody. That is crazy. That is just leading up to something bad. It's not like we suddenly figure things out. And then with all these news of companies delaying their games and milestones internally, like I'm very fearful for everybody that hopefully they don't do that before the holidays. But as history shows, that's the best time for these game companies to lay people off, and that's going to be crazy scary. And I hope you guys have a game plan when that happens, or be okay enough with temporarily taking December off. So, yeah, that's why I felt like it was a perfect time to kind of dedicate this week's episode to me being in a soapbox, talk to you guys about, status updates of what I've been doing, what I've been up to, and my plan for the rest of the year. So GDux Redux is coming back with a different form. I'm still planning it for November, but it's kind of like a revamp of the website. I'm not one to repeat what's being done, right? I'm a trendsetter. So last year we were one of the first virtual conference, and now because every year or the whole year is like completely got dumped on by virtual conferences, I just want to remind people that GDux has a bunch of resources already. So there's a lot of exciting things on that side that I'm doing. So in tradition, though, starting from last year, for the first time in my 13 plus years of in a career, I took December off, just completely unplugged, just play games the whole time, and just didn't think about work. Never had that before. Even with plenty of vacation time, it was like 2 weeks max, but not the whole month, right? Gonna do the same this month. Probably the week of Thanksgiving is when I'm going to start just taking everything off. But don't worry, still going to have weekly episodes. There's about like 20 GDux episodes that haven't been played for you guys that are incredible, that I can't wait to share with you guys. So that time of absence until 2021 in January is when I'm going to be coming back. But up to then, there's going to be awesome guests coming on. Super excited and to share with you guys. But it's cool to kind of see people discovering the podcast in recent months this year, and starting from episode 1. So it's nice. And I've always been a fan of time capsules. Just never had the discipline to do daily journals or to bury a note to myself in some ground around my house. But the podcast, I've always, in addition to getting great professionals with real advice to help you with your career and your life problems, it is a way for me to kind of reflect back where I was, my opinions, my ideas, for this week or that last week or the week after, always permanently online, right? For me to kind of rediscover what I was thinking. So it's always interesting to hear listeners from way back, kind of, especially the roundtable episodes, kind of like confirming a lot about my silly prophecies. Right? I gab on, but with precision though. So I hope everybody in general will hang on for the rest of 2020. I hope that your company is not is secure enough to kind of carry everyone forward past this pandemic. But regardless of that hope, my last words are, unchain yourself, right? Work on that side project you've been putting off. Do that thing that you've always wanted to do. Even start your day doing what you want to do and then getting to the full-time work and getting that done, right? Whatever rhythm, whatever scheduling you got to figure it out and stick to it, because this is the perfect time to do it. And this is the scariest time not to do it. And even though everyone's safely at home, it's a ticking clock. Something's bad. It's leading to something bad. So if this year, short of Donald Trump not dying from COVID, have been pretty, this has been a pretty lit movie if you're into drama and disaster movies. And we're not even in November yet. So it's going to be a crazy last 2 months. And I want you guys to be fully secured going into those last 2 months, having some fun project that you're working on that is one day going to be valuable and self-sustainable, right? So that's it. I want to thank you guys for your time. Thank you for live viewers for asking questions. Usually I film these on Tuesdays, 11 a.m. This is a little later, but you can catch live games recap episodes. I'm starting that back up starting tomorrow at 10. Don't walk out of the theater yet. I'm still in my apartment, man. I'm not in some place. I'll be in my apartment hanging around. But yeah, games recap is coming back. So many news that have to be covered before our roundtable news episode every month. So games recap is coming back to kind of give like quick 10-minute glimpse of my thoughts of what's going on. The Valve thing was pretty surprising. You guys should definitely check that out. Maybe I'll dedicate the first one about that. But yeah, the best way to prepare yourself is to kind of pay attention to what's going on, obviously, and not just about politics. Who cares about that? You're a game developer. So worry about like game development stuff, something that you have control over. And just read the news, see what companies doing great, what companies are hiring, and constantly be out there, be competitive. Yeah. The worst thing you can do as a game developer is being complacent. It's not the industry to do that. So I hope you guys are finding this hour helpful. And I look forward to hearing all you guys' great success stories. All right. As always, see you guys on the Discord. Today, to great success the last month, we've been doing a lot of Game Night Thursdays. So on the Discord channel, you can find more info about that. And to find the Discord channel, you can go in the link description or go to GameDevUnchained.com and you'll find the Discord channel through that way to talk to other listeners, find out, and chat with me, to be honest. But Game Night Thursdays, to kind of like throw it out there. I don't think I publicly kind of talked about it in an episode. I just game with you guys on Thursdays. Last week we played Rocket League. Weeks before that, we were playing Warzone, and we tried to pick games that are free so everybody can buy and download it. Download it for free, right? And it's been fun, man. It's been great to kind of game with you guys. Shout out to all the Rocket Leaguers that I've been playing with. I've been sucking, man. I've been trying to get back into this, just gaming in general, and just trying to be social about it. I mean, because it's been boring, dude. any chance that I can talk to anyone that isn't my wife and or a 10-year-old kid, I welcome it. And I'm at that place. So thank you guys for talking. Jumping into my apartment, my messy apartment. I got to clean that up in some moment. But thanks, guys. Have a good one.